right, so for those of you who might have just joined us, again, this is the 7th annual Disability Pride celebration in Toronto, known as Simply People Celebrating Our Lives and Identities. You can visit our website at www.disabilitypride.ca. Our vision is to create an environment of positive synergies and attitudes of being proud and removing barriers and continuing to increase accessibility and inclusion for all people with disabilities. This event is organized by Canada-wide Accessibility for Post-Secondary Students, CanWAPS, and Friends of CanWAPS, including Link Up Employment Services, VoicePrint, Easter Seals Canada Access to Entertainment, Diversity Works, Scatting Court Community Center, as well as the Abilities Arts Festival. So our next guest speaker is a friend of mine that I've known for several years now. His name, many of you might know him. His name's John Ray. He's the Vice President of the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians. He's done a lot of advocacy work over the years. He has about 30+ years of disability advocacy experience. So John Ray would like to say a few words today, so join me in welcoming John Ray.
Thank you very much. Disability pride. Now, there are two wonderful words that we need to hear more often. Those are two words that we need to instill in all of us, not just in our heads, but in our hearts, in our guts. Thank you, Isma, for the opportunity to say a few words tonight, to participate in this year's celebration. And that's really what this is all about. Tonight is for us. Tonight is about us. Tonight is an opportunity for us to celebrate our accomplishments and redouble our dedication to bringing about true equality for all persons with disabilities in Canada or anywhere else in the world. This year, we in Canada have been celebrating Canada's ratification of the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabilities. That convention may not give us a whole bunch of new rights, especially those of us in Canada, because we have a fair history of laws already in place. But what it does do is it sets out in much greater detail, in much greater clarity, what a truly accessible and inclusive Canada can look like in important areas that are critical to our participation in the economic, social, cultural, and political life of our communities. Areas like transportation, education, employment, communications, and so on. The convention also requires Canada to collect data and to report 2 years after we ratified it to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and every 4 years thereafter. That is a way for civil society, and that's us, hopefully to keep Canada's feet to the fire, because after all, many politicians are good at issuing reports, even passing legislation, but when it comes to actually doing things, that can be a very, very different story. The convention traveled a very different road. It had more involvement from civil society than any other convention. It was the fastest convention ever concluded. And I think that the participation of civil society offers many important lessons. Most importantly, that this kind of direct involvement must not end with the adoption of the convention. It must continue throughout its development and implementation everywhere in Canada, both federally, provincially, and right here in this city. Last year, the president of the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, and we're one of Canada's numerous consumer organizations working nationally, provincially, and here in Toronto, coined a new phrase, a new way of looking at our needs and aspirations. And that term is rights holders. We are rights holders. Now, what does he mean by that? Too often, governments and others attempt to lump all of us, consumers, service providers, parents, and so forth, under that too frequently used term, stakeholders. Well, we aren't just one other group of stakeholders. We are the people about whom policies and legislation are developed. We are different. We live disability every day. We know best what are our own needs. And as a result, we must be in a different place. We must have a primary and preeminent seat at the table anytime and anywhere any policy, program, or piece of legislation is being developed that affects us. We must be there. You are all familiar with my favorite phrase from the disability rights movement, nothing about us without us. You've heard that. Anyone who believes in disability pride believes in it. And it's that same thing. We are the ones who need to be more involved. Now, by contrast, we must look at the AODA. It continues to move forward, but at a snail's pace. So far, only one accessibility regulation has been given the force of a regulation, although more are promised this year. Hopefully, Canada's ratification of the UN Convention will spur government to give greater attention and more activity towards the AODA, because at this point, it is hard to imagine that Ontario is anywhere close to being on track with achieving full accessibility by that far-off date of 2025, a date that old guys like me hope will still be around, perhaps to see. We are often told by governments, the private and public sectors, that they would like to do the things that we want them to do, but it simply will cost too much. You've heard that. I've heard it more times than I care to remember over my 35 years in this work, you know. And if you think recently to the preposterous expenditures of an estimated $1.3 billion, that's billion, not million, billion, for security during the recent summits. I don't know about you, but I do not ever want to hear again that what we need costs too much. Never again. I don't want to ever hear it again. It is true that resources aren't unlimited. That is true. But you know, it seems to me that whenever governments want to do something, magically they find the resources. Isn't that strange? Haven't you noticed it too? Well, never again do I want to hear the cost excuse when it comes to the things that we need and want. Never again. So, what am I asking you to do tonight? At least, I could ask you to do a lot of things, but let me focus on three. One is, we can all write letters to our local newspapers raising disability issues. Because a lot of what we do is trying to keep our issues on other people's radar screens. Sometimes it seems like we get forgotten about. That must not happen. Secondly, it's election time. Yes, it's election time. They're going to be knocking on your doors and appearing at candidates' meetings. This is our chance to ask them what's in their platforms that deal with our issues. What are they prepared to do? What are they prepared to commit to do to advance our agenda? This is the time. The third thing And in my mind, the most important is for those of you who have not yet done so, get involved in the disability rights movement. It's unfortunate what our history teaches us. And it teaches us some hard lessons. And what it teaches us is that most of the rights that we have now achieved didn't come easily. The system didn't just recognize the rightfulness of what we need and hand it to us. No, it didn't happen that way most of the time. Most of the time, we had to fight like hell. And I can tell you that some of us who've been involved on the front lines for a long time are growing a bit older and a bit tired. And thus, it's up to you. We need you. We need your energy. We need your involvement. We need your new ideas. In order to, because today, even today, while we do attempt to move ahead, I'm afraid that we spend too much of our time fighting a rearguard action to maintain the advances we've made and to prevent the introduction of new barriers. Yes, new barriers. They still get introduced. Even with the AODA at present, we still deal with new barriers. And so, my message is a simple one. Moving our agenda forward ultimately is up to us. We've got to do it. We've got to come together. It's time more people got involved with groups like the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, like Citizens with Disabilities Ontario, or signing up to receive information from the AODA Alliance. But get involved. We need you. We need you. If we're going to achieve the kind of accessible and inclusive Canada we want and we need, it is up to us. Rights are what we want. When do we want them? Can't hear you. What do we want?
Yeah.
What do we want?
Yeah.
Come on, I can't hear you. What do we want?
Yeah.
When do we want them? Thank you very much.
World around just to find you. So we're gonna break it down nice and quiet, all right? Nice and quiet. Here we go. Left out loud.